Okay, so this is the problem that we want to do now. We want to find the partial derivative of f with respect to s. And as you can imagine, this is going to be pretty messy because we have many different ways to get down to s from f. Okay, so remember the idea is we just want to take the path, all of the paths from f down to s, and just multiply the partial derivatives along the way. And this is a good problem to have on the test because you actually have to know what the chain rule is to do this. Okay, so the partial derivative of f with respect to s, just take all the paths down. So I could go from f to x to u to s, that's one path, and try to organize your work so that you don't get lost. So the partial derivative of f with respect to x times the partial derivative of u with respect to, see, this is what I mean. Organize your work so you don't get lost. Times the partial derivative of x with respect to u times the partial derivative of u with respect to s. Okay, so I could go from f, x, u, s, f, x, v. Well, v doesn't depend on s, so I don't have to do that. Now I can go through y, f, y, v. V doesn't depend on s, f, y, w. W depends on s. So this is going to be partial derivative of f with respect to y times the partial derivative of y with respect to w times the partial derivative of w with respect to s. Finally, how can I go through z, f, z, u, s? So now this is going to be plus the partial derivative of f with respect to z times the partial derivative of z with respect to u times the partial derivative of u with respect to s, and then I could go from f to z to w to s. So plus the partial derivative of f with respect to z times the partial derivative of z with respect to w times the partial derivative of w with respect to s. And now all of these answers are numbers, so I have to use this information up here. I have to use this information to help me complete the problem, okay? And so the partial derivative of f with respect to x, that's 2. The partial derivative of x with respect to u, that's 5. The partial derivative of u with respect to s, that's 5. Plus the partial derivative of f with respect to y, that's 3. The partial derivative of y with respect to w, that's 8. The partial derivative of w with respect to s, that's 2. Plus the partial derivative of f with respect to v, that's 4, times the partial derivative of z with respect to u, that's 9, times the partial derivative of u with respect to s, that's 5. And finally, this last one, the partial derivative of f with respect to z, that's 4. The partial derivative of z with respect to w, that's 10. The partial derivative of w with respect to s, that's 2. And when you add all of this together, when you do all of this multiplication and add them together, what you end up with is 358. And I will let you verify that on your own. Now, on Dr. Yasskin's tests, it's possible that he lets students use calculators. I don't remember. On our test, ordinarily, you would not be allowed to use a calculator, though on this test, you will be allowed to use a calculator since it's going to be a take-home test. And so expect to see stuff like this. I mean, expect to see kind of nasty numbers like this. Or not nasty, but just a lot of, tedious arithmetic to do.